Hi, everybody. Several years, hi again. So several years ago, I needed a stick. Um, and one of the dads had brought us this beautiful piece of madrone. So I wanted to make a talking stick. Now, in the past, I had used like certain stuffed animals and stuff to pass around for kids who might want to contribute to a conversation we might be having during our gathering times. But I wanted to use the concept of the talking stick, which is an indigenous concept. And it was a way of organizing conversations and a way of making sure that everyone who wanted to contribute to the conversation had an opportunity to. So I got the idea from that tradition. And this was the first one that I made. I just had a piece, this rawhide string, and I put some beads on it. And we would pass it around. And the understanding that was developing from this was if you're holding the talking stick, it's your turn to talk and it's our turn to listen. And children need something more physical. It's not just helpful for them, for us to say, it's not your turn. It's not your turn because there's there's this understanding as you get to be older that there's a beginning and an end of turn taking. Well, with young children, they don't get that. And so the physical element of having something to hold on to, that you are given now the authority. You are now in the position of being the speaker to hold this. And when you're finished, then you get to pass it on. Um, but anyway, it worked really well with the kids. But when I moved it to say another year or two later, I realized that they needed to contribute to the making of this stick. And so what I would do then is just go and find a nice stick. And in some cases, I would have to sand it a little bit, get the rough edges off, and maybe spray paint it or put some acrylic paint on it just as the base, dry it just so that it was not rough when they held it in their hands. And then what I did was, and I may have just used yarn and a string with a little yarn needle on the end of it, and then given each of the kids maybe 8 or 10 beads in a cup and let them string, and then they added their string of beads to the talking stick. So I've had talking sticks that had multiple strings on them. And then the next year I might have cut all that off and apart, and then we just started over again and making it. And the reason is the contribution lends itself to the sense of community because I see posted in some rooms, we are community of learners, and it's like, well, what does that really mean? Because we have to prove it. If we are inviting children to be a community, we have to prove it, and we have to afford that in all of our activities and all of our conversations and in our interactions. But I found the talking stick helped a lot with children who were maybe afraid to speak up a little bit, but they knew that once they were holding this, that this was their space and this was their turn. And so turn taking took on a more concrete understanding. And some kids would just hold it, just look around, and then pass it on. But it's just knowing that right now this is your space. You get to stand in this space and say whatever you want. And I say stand figuratively. It's not that they actually stood and had to stand. But it worked out a lot with, well, what about me? What about me? How many kids do you have in your classroom? What about me? What about me? They're all named the same thing, that 5 minutes. And it tended to focus the children's attention and the understanding that it's now our turn to listen. It's our turn to listen. That goes for the teacher too, because sometimes I found myself kind of interrupting. But it's like I have to honor this this tradition that we're developing in our classroom. So, and I also think that this is really seeing children. So there you go. Try it out. Try it out. Take some personal notes too. Reflect on it as you experience it with the children. Reflect on it. Make some little sticky notes or something where you can just reflect and yeah, this, and this. And I've noticed that maybe so and so is still very hesitant to want to talk. So maybe what I need to do instead of just waiting for someone to raise their hand or say me, is ask the quiet child, Juliet, did you want to have a turn to hold the stick? Maybe she just wants to hold the stick. Maybe he just wants to hold the stick and just say something like, hi. And that's all great. But it's to me it has endeared itself. This piece right here has really endeared itself in my memories. Anyway, take care. Enjoy. I hope you make a talking stick.